Awesome. Thank you for the lovely music request from our speakers this morning. It's great to see you all. Welcome to today's webinar, The Land Heals, which is co-hosted with Ceres Trust and 11th Hour Project, two of our funders in the network. So thank you, Kat, and thank you, Sarah Bell. My name is Erin Olszewski, and I'm Program Director with Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Funders, calling in from Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne land in what is now called Boulder, Colorado. As Holly has plugged into the chat, for those of you who may have joined after she put that in, we'd love to get a sense of who's on the call today so our speakers know who they're chatting to. So please introduce yourselves in the chat, and we'd love for you to include the native land that you're calling in from and any other helpful information that you think folks would like to know. So for those of you who may be newer to SAFSF, I'd like to share just a little bit about who we are before we get started. So SAFSF is the leading PSO, or philanthropic serving organization, for funders seeking to drive change in support of just and sustainable food and agriculture systems. We're a small nonprofit with a staff of 11 that are spread across 8 states, working entirely virtually. We have more than 100 grantmaker and investor members as well. Our mission is to amplify the impact of philanthropic and investment communities in support of just and sustainable food and agriculture systems. So with all of that being said, again, I'm really thrilled that Kat and Sarah Bell have brought this webinar idea to us today. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to the two of them.
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Kat Gillier. We don't need to quite do this slide yet, so Sarah and I can just be up here to say hi, if that's okay. But my name is Kat. I'm with the Executive Director with Ceres Trust, and I use she, her, and Sarah, just if you could welcome everyone and say hello, that'd be great. Thank you so much for co-hosting, co-moderating this discussion today.
Yes, thank you, Kat. I'm Sarah Bell, and I'm with the 11th Hour Project, a program of the Schmidt Family Foundation. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really honored to be with you all today and be able to support the speakers that you're going to hear from.
Great. So I also just want to thank Erin and Holly and everyone at SAFSF for organizing all of the logistics for this conversation and organizing us, and this current and ongoing commitment to land access. And land as a core priority within the network, which is wonderful. So I'm calling today from unceded Lejana Ohlone territory. We could shift slides now. And as I share and we share this acknowledgement, I also want to share here links to some of the current ways to be in relationship with Lejana Ohlone people and consider contributing in solidarity with Native peoples and people, original and current stewards of the land wherever we are. So for my East Bay colleagues, and I've already seen someone in the chat shout out paying and contributing via the Shumi tax, which is an appreciation, a gift, or a tax toward the work of Sogorea Te Land Trust, an urban Indigenous women land trust. I'll put the links into the chat. There's also a resource guide they've put together with others about other honor taxes and real rent projects. And there are many, important ways to be in solidarity with the current priorities of Indigenous people as we also acknowledge the land that we're on. So today, I'm honored to introduce our agenda. We could go to the next slide and invite us all into this learning, context setting, and kind of readying us for relationships of healing the land conversation in space. So this is part one of a two-part conversation that we're having today. And today, we're especially given the breadth of the histories and the context setting and the healing stories that are being shared today. We're not going to have a ton of time for dialogue, and we are inviting you to this part 2 conversation on May 9th. You will receive a follow-up invitation where we'll have the opportunity to have more juicy conversation, to get into more of some of the deepening relationships and the nitty-gritty of practical action paths for funders, any barriers people might be running into, and coming to some solutions, ideas, pathways, next steps together. So today we're going to be hearing incredibly brief yet incredibly important context and histories related to land, food, and agricultural systems necessary for us to create change. You can go back to that agenda slide. So that's the first 25 minutes. And then we'll hear some land healing stories So the first part is going to be brief and critically important, and an invitation into continued and ongoing learning. And next, we're going to hear in the context of these histories that have been shared and that we collectively inherit, the stories of healing with the land and our people that is being seeded, is alive, is flourishing, is being stewarded by these incredible speakers. So then we're going to wrap up with just an initial set of questions around guidance and important reflections for us as funders, and an invitation into that next conversation on May 9th. So as we get started here, I just welcome everyone. Want us to take a breath, welcome those with funder hats and roles on, and especially those of us who are white, into this opportunity. I'll say that, me as a white woman, for learning. I ask for us that might experience tightening or distraction, numbing out, some of the ways that we do not take this in, to help ourselves to stay present and in this conversation and receive this incredible investment of time and energy with curiosity, openness, and willingness. And I, just really invite us to stick with this conversation. I'm so grateful for it. And as I turn it over to the four incredible speakers, I'm going to pop their bios in the chat. We can go to that next slide. You also received their bios in your invitation. I really do want to thank you anew for your generosity of spirit, time, energy, your wisdom, your investment in conversation with us, in us, to create a shared context so that we may one day deepen, dream together, build together, co-create together. Thank you. I hope we are here to be with you in this. I wish you protection and appreciation for all of your work, and I wish for reciprocity and abundance as we move through this conversation and connection. So we are here for what you believe needs to be brought into this room with these people in this meeting today. What happens in this circle? Thank you for this. And in order of presentation, I'm just going to welcome and turn this over now to Zoe Holloman, Matt Wilson, Laurelani Keoho Kalole, and Conda Mason. Incredible lineup, Wisdom Heart. Thank you so much. Over to you, Zoe.
Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to start with a little bit of context. In Minnesota, I work with farmers of color, sustainable farmers, and environmental justice leaders. And our mainstream agricultural system in Minnesota is heavily invested in commodity crops like corn and soy, used to make animal feed and grain-based fuels, and certainly not mostly to make food to feed our communities. It's using practices that disrupt the soil structure and depend on cycles of hazardous pesticides and chemical fertilizers. And those things in such large quantities are causing ongoing and extreme community and environmental health problems and harm. And this system is supporting a lot of labor exploitation, inequities amongst farmers and who has resources and land to farm, and consolidation of wealth and power for a small few. And, big industry tells us, well, this is the only way that ag can be. We have to dominate nature and we have to stratify people. But with such stark differences between, what our communities need, the healing that needs to happen, the changes that we need to make, and what the system is giving us, it demands a reckoning. Next slide, please. True and accurate history of our country's policies around race, land, food, culture, political power, and wealth building show us a very clear story about white supremacy and what has been taken from Indigenous communities and communities of color. And through unpacking the history together, we can begin to face the trauma and the real costs of racism in our food and agricultural systems and our larger society. And the Food and Justice Project is a political education timeline and workshop created by myself and several other food justice activists. We made it in 2017, and it was really something to help groups of people witness together the brutal history of enslavement, divestment, and genocide, and the powerful stories of resistance to it, which are obscured by today's mainstream historical narratives. And this project unearths these stories with the intention of healing and informing present day actions to improve the food system for our local communities. Next slide, please. The timeline begins with an acknowledgement that Indigenous people have diverse and sustainable food systems, made plant-based medicine that sustained their communities for centuries before the Europeans arrived. Next slide, please. The amaranth, which was a staple crop, it's a superfood. It's pretty easy to cultivate. It's also been used in building materials. The conquistadors in the 1500s burned large swaths of amaranth as a way to cripple Indigenous communities and their defenses against the attack of colonization. Next slide, please. And then the transatlantic slave trade began in the early 1600s with the Dutch, and then other European powers followed suit. And it was estimated that 12.5 million adults and children were taken from their African homelands. And 1 out of 12 people died en route on the boats crossing the Atlantic. Next slide, please. And in the 1780s, the late 1700s, we saw some of the first Native American reservations, and that system started, which began a pattern of forced relocation and a stripping of resources and connection to the land. Next slide, please. A major tool
I think we might have lost Zoe. Are others hearing that? Kat or any of the other speakers today, does anyone feel comfortable hopping in while hopefully Zoe rejoins us?
I'm wondering, this is Conda. I'm wondering, is she back? Zoe? Maybe Matt, can you jump into where you're going to be next? And then we can follow.
Yeah, we can jump to my slides. It's the next one more.
And noting that there's a lot of good stuff there that
Yeah.
Zoe was going to get us up to speed on, and hopefully she will still be able to.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Hamadakepi, Matthew Wilson, Amanchepalo, Rosebud, South Dakota, Amataha, Suchanga ko ekta wo ashi chamu, Chante washjena pictures apalo. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Wilson, calling in from Rosebud, South Dakota. I am a enrolled citizen of the Suchanga Lakota Oyate, also known as the Rosebud Sioux tribe. And so today I wanted to talk about my people's connection with buffalo. And I think just to give some background and what Zoe would have covered too, is just Indigenous people had sustainable and complex economic and societal systems for millennia. And the reason why this thrived and this worked, because it worked in concert with the environment and with nature. And a lot of this has been predicated on the prioritization of relationships. And for us, we have a sacred relationship with buffalo. It can go all the way back to our creation stories when we first emerged from the Black Hills Buffalo have really taught us this concept, what we call in Lakota, wodakuye. And it's this idea that we are all interconnected and interdependent as well. Everything from, a tree to a stranger on the street to livestock. We're all connected, and therefore we should treat everyone and everything as relatives. So there was this saying that we call as being a good relative. And so the Buffalo had really taught us that. And so we are considered buffalo people. And so our economy relied heavily on buffalo, and we were nomadic. And so we were always following the buffalo wherever they went. And we relied on buffalo not only as a main staple for a food source, but we relied heavily but the buffalo is used in terms of providing clothing, providing shelter. Our teepees were made with their hides. And buffalo also allowed us to trade with other indigenous nations in the area for other goods. We can go to the next slide. And so on the onset of colonization, some of the policies around Indians were, kill the Indian, save the man, really, which was really this idea of we need to do forced assimilation. And so the best way that the US government decided to do that was through our food system. So they started to attack the food system for Lakota people, and that was through buffalo. So in this picture, you see the mass extinction of buffalo. And there's this big pile, as you can see, this big pile of skulls there. And so this really forced, our people to look for other food sources. And then on came the reservation systems, really forcing us onto small swaths of land. And I'll talk about it later, though, but getting into the reservation systems itself, really breaking up the village system that we relied heavily on. And there's a rural, vast area, and having the central services located in one, central area within the reservation really made it hard for people to be independent and self-sufficient as we used to be. We can move to the next slide. And because we weren't able to do any hunting, we were forced to be dependent on government food rations. And our traditional diet consisted of lean protein, complex carbohydrates, and think of like wild rice, other grains that grew naturally and wild in our area. We knew all that information, and we knew how to live off the land and with the land. So having to go from that to, sugar, white flour, oil, that was just very, it was so different from what we're used to, which kind of gets into the next slide. The loss of traditional ecological knowledge. We weren't able to pass that on to the next generation, all this information that we used to be able to be self-sufficient. And a lot of that loss in the current diet that we have now led to a lot of problems that we're seeing today with diet-related diseases. And also just our current economy. We are like Rosebud, I think, is like the second or third poorest county in the entire United States. So there was an exorbitant amount of wealth that was extracted from indigenous people and from Lakota people. I think you can go to the next one. Oh, sorry, you can go back. And so what I want to leave on this last slide is just, and I'll get into it later though, but just the idea of this wodakuye concept. And that is something that we are trying to bring back to our reservation and within our work as well. And so I'll talk about that later, but now I will pass it on to Laurelani.
Aloha. Thank you for bringing that slide up. Kahai e na Hawaii, lo kahia kulike, olu kamana o, ha kokulana, aho nui alana kila, aloha. Aloha mai kako. O wau o Larilani ke oho kalole, no wau I ka moku o ko olau I Anahola ma Kamawai Lualani, Kauai. Mahalo nui no ko kako o kipa ana mai I ke ia hala wai. My name is Larilani ke oho kalole, I live in the land district of Ko'olau in Anahola on the island of Kauai. Hawaii has 8 main islands with approximately a population of 1.5 million people. Currently, those that identify as Kanaka Maoli or Kanaka Oiwi or Native Hawaiian run about 310,000. And then those that have moved away that identify as Kanaka Maoli are around 370,000. Next slide, please. Kanaka Maoli, Kanaka Oiwi, or Native Hawaiian are how we self-identify. Aloha Aina is innate to us in the way of, just like Matt explained for buffalo, our Aina and our land is what gives us mana and essence. What is grown on the Aina gives us mana and essence. Our first man came from Aina, and that first food was kalo. So similar to buffalo, our indigenous food for Hawaii is kalo, otherwise known as taro. And we lift up the ancestor that is Mother Earth, Papahanaumoku, in order to bring in the concept of love of land, but also that land is ohana to us, it's family. And the planting, gathering of food, medicine, all manifest energy from her, from Papahanaumoku. So when we are talking about Aloha Aina, it is much more than a bumper sticker or a t-shirt, or as the kids say, Aloha Aina, warriors, and they make a lot of branding around that. It really is the essence of the earth and sustaining energy and mana too. There is so much, next slide, please. So much historical wounding in the relationship of Aina and how Aina was changing hands all through the last 200 years, and it's very complex. So in ancient times, land or Aina was not owned, but respected and cultivated as your kuleana, your responsibility. As a woman, as a man, as a child, you were expected to take care of these things. And through imperialism, degradation, colonization, we lost pretty much over 1.8 million acres as our Hawaiian government crown lands were taken during annexation to the United States in 1893. Eventually, Kanaka needed to move away from rural and self-sustaining lifestyles to work and labor for paid wages in order to pay for what little land they did hold on through. And in short, maybe 3 or 4 generations, families here in particular have lost all land. They've been quiet titled, they've been bought up, they've been run through red tape, so not able to find places that lead back to their lineal lands. With the increase of foreign occupation in the early years when ships used to come over for either plantation or military reasons, the Native Hawaiian population went from 700,000 in 1778 to 40,000 in 1900s due to smallpox, influenza, measles, and whooping cough. I just want to stop here and ask our other coordinators how we're doing on time, because I really want to leave Conda open, even though Zoe hopped off early. Do we still have a little bit of time?
Yeah, hi Lorelani.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you do. We're gonna have Conda go after you, and then
Right.
Zoe will hop in right after that.
Okay, sweet. Because I can roll the rest of my presentation into the end part. I just want to say, similar again to what Matt was sharing, the loss of land, loss of language, declining health, housing, workforce challenges, they all played factors in the continued story of our people and losing Aina and losing their health. So The work here has been really slow and steady, but the rising up of many of our Hawaiian educators, lawyers, farmers in the last 25 to 30 years is really bringing us back to center and to our piko that we know is Aloha Aina. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it over to Kanda.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you. The presenters before me, I'm so entrenched in your stories. I'm forgetting my own. You're beautiful. Thank you for what I'm learning right now from you. I am Kanda Mason, and I want to talk a little bit about the context of my work and the work that I'm doing and the people that I work with. And again, it is about food. It's about the foodways. It's about the destruction of foodways and the recovery. And so I want to talk about what is one of the staple food in West Africa, particularly, was rice. And we think of Africa at beginning with the Europeans coming in and capturing people and bringing them to this land. And there was a whole lot more before that, a beautiful continent with beautiful people and very connected to the land, very connected indigenously to the land, just like our indigenous sisters and brothers here on this land. And the rice was our taro, it was our corn, it was that which gave us sustenance, was rice. And the African people were able to grow rice in the lowlands, the highlands, the wetlands, the dry lands. They had systems of rice cultivation that were so advanced that when the Europeans came to pillage, they saw this rice cultivation in Western Africa, what was called actually the rice coast. They saw this incredible rice cultivation. They intentionally targeted rice farmers to capture because they needed to feed people in this new world. And so what happened is that a lot of the rice, of the people who were captured ended in South Carolina, in this part of the land. They ended up in South Carolina, which South Carolina became the rice capital of the New World, okay? And what happened is that in the 1700s, rice was the main cash crop in this part of the world. And it was on the backs of the African people who were enslaved. Now let's talk about South Carolina. South Carolina is filled with, and where the rice was, it was filled with bayous and with swamps where there were alligators and snakes. It was treacherous work, dangerous and treacherous. It was horrible. And yet that is where the enslaved people were forced to grow a rice culture that became the #1 cash crop. Okay, so that is what happened then. Emancipation comes, and of course, they're like, gone. I'm out, I'm not doing this anymore. And they left. Just a note is that the rice capital of the US right now is in Arkansas. Okay, it moved to Arkansas. But for a long time, there was no rice capital because the white folks did not know how to grow rice. So when the African people came after the Emancipation Proclamation, what happened is that even with Jim Crow and with all the horrific things that the so-called free African people had, they still managed, without getting their 40 acres and a mule, with no assistance from the government, they managed to aggregate 20 million acres of land collectively. Next slide, please. So I have this slide because it says, if you want to understand wealth and inequality in this country, you have to understand Black land loss. You have to understand Black land loss. The next slide. So in the 1920 census, Black folk collectively had 20 million acres of land. Okay. Today, less than 2 million acres are we stewarding. We were 14% of all farmers in the US in the 1920s, 925,000 farmers. We are down to 1.4% of the farmers. What happened? 30,000 acres are being lost annually. And I say lost, but taken annually through legal and illegal means. A lot of it has to do with our government, the USDA, who intentionally took the land that the newly freed Black folks were stewarding and growing their land on. That is a loss of generational wealth. That is a huge loss of generational wealth. And so that is what has happened, and that it is still happening in this moment. 30,000 acres are being lost annually. The Black farmers are decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. I'm going to talk further about my work. Our work with Jubilee Justice is trying to stop that gap, that leaking gap of land loss. It is imperative that we who are from the land, from Africa, from the land, people of the land, we need to get back to our land. We need to be able to steward land. We need to be able to grow food on land. And so we work with Black farmers, and I'll tell you more about it, and hopefully trying to close that gap of land loss. Thank you. And now I am going to pass it back to our dear Zoe. Zoe, are you back with us?
Yes, I am. And I
Beautiful.
might go take my camera off just because I'm hoping that Holly, might you be able to help me get back to the slide with the map of the US? It is about, it says Homestead Act on it. It's back several slides. Yes, right there. Great. Thank you. And thanks for your patience, everyone. Yeah, so we see land seizure from Indigenous people and compacts like the Louisiana Purchase, the Mexican-American War, and through those over 270 million acres of land was redistributed through the Homestead Act, through the GI Bill, which often was provided for white soldiers, but not provided for soldiers of color, Black soldiers, through redlining and other ways. This was a transferring of the largest amount of land from people of color to European and European descended people. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Bonanza farms were the birth of industrial agriculture with huge wheat farms that spanned thousands of acres. And they were at this time not being farmed by actual farmers. These were railroad investors in the Northern Pacific Railroad Company, and this was land that was given to them in exchange for their investment in the railroad before they were seeing returns. And so from 1875 to 1890, these industrial farms were pretty profitable with the use of new machinery and huge crews of exploited labor, mostly people of color. And so through these farms in Minnesota, in North Dakota, in the Red River Valley, this region became one of the US's largest wheat producing areas. And over time, this intensely extractive agricultural approach exhausted the land, which only then were these industrialists willing to sell it back to smaller farmers. And at that point, it was really late. The soil, the ecology of the soil had been destroyed. And so that's what led us to the Dust Bowl of the 1930s, which led to mass hunger. And it took many years to bring the soil back. Next slide, please. And so in addition to genocide and murder, and these different tactics were used to really sever people of color from their relationship with the land, with their food and culture, with decision-making and wealth, and all of these things that are their people's spiritual practices, their physical, emotional, mental health, their community structures, their cultural identities, and really a sense of autonomy over their own lives were impacted and destroyed. And so repairing and restoring these severed connections through policy, through programs, through being in relationship together is critical for actualizing racial equity and for giving us all a chance to heal from this extreme trauma. And then I put the quote from James Baldwin there because I think it's poignant. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So a message for us all. And then I'll hand it over to Matt. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Zoe.
Holly, you'll want to just fast forward a bit since we're going a little out of order today.
Thank you all. Yeah, so this is just a picture from our coming from our website, Sichanghupi, meaning we are Sichanghu. Sichanghu translates to burnt thigh, and there's a really incredible story how we got that name. It has to deal with sacrifice and really prioritizing our young so that our next generation can can keep going forward and taking on that name. So we are located in central South Dakota, and we have a you can go to the next slide actually. So we serve about 34,000 tribal citizens. I would say about 28,000 live on the reservation, and the rest kind of live on the outskirts or in other areas in the United States. And I would just like to say first off that our work is really guided around what we call 7 Gen. And you can go to the next slide, please. 7 Gen really requires us to look 7 generations ahead and imagine the world we want to see for our great-grandchildren's great-grandchildren. And so part of that is asking ourselves, what do we need to do today in order to make that world a reality? And then this principle is just so it's so important to us that it was actually amended to be written in our in my nation's constitution. And this is just a screenshot of it right here, where it says the tribal council shall develop plans and consider implications of the decisions they make on the next 7 generations. And I also just want to say 7 Gen isn't a Lakota philosophy. It's a philosophy or a prophecy, if you will, that's apparent in other indigenous communities across the world as well. But going back to 7 Gen, we kind of asked that question around our community. What do they want to see for the next generations to come? And kind of the first thing that people wanted to see was the revitalization of our relationship with food and with buffalo. And you can go to the next slide, please. And so this helped us launch our Sichanghu ecosystem. And so we don't only just focus on food and agriculture. We focus on the things that we've lost with colonization, including language and culture, food sovereignty rather than food security, health, indigenous education. And we also focus on building services that our community needs that we aren't able to get in such a rural area, including heating and cooling, construction, and housing. You can go to the next slide, please. And the way we do it is through this ecosystem approach. Our business model consists of 3 organizations working together under one shared mission. And so we all kind of approach that mission in a different way, but we're working to increase enterprise and nation development, community development, and wealth building. You can go to the next slide, please. And so kind of 7 Gen, I talked about the idea or the concept of Wodaki, which really kind of means embracing that complex systems thinking. And again, that goes back to the teachings of the buffalo and how we do that. And so we view food not only just in silos, but we make sure that we're touching on and seeing how food is connected with health, with education, even housing. We can go to the next slide, please. And so what we did was we launched the Food Sovereignty Initiative program back in 2014. And it really came from our community's need and desire to, like I said, revitalize that relationship with food. People wanted to see more local foods being grown here. Because Rosewood actually has a decent amount of food that's grown and produced here. A lot of it leaves in terms of, a lot of it's grown by non-Indigenous people who lease our lands. And a lot of it is commodity crops, our cattle. And so we wanted to see food that's grown here staying here on the reservation, being consumed by our people. So the Food Sovereignty Initiative was launched in order to create this movement to indigenize that food system, to transform a food system that was extractive and transform it to one that's more inclusive of our culture, as well as supporting We Chose Only, which is holistic health. And we were originally started under our nonprofit, which was Redco. And today we have launched 2 more nonprofits, which is our CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution, and our Community Development Corporation. You can go to the next slide, please. So the way we kind of approach food sovereignty is really learning how to grow and produce our own food. Traditionally, we weren't farmers. We were hunters and gatherers. And so what we were trying to do is teach people how to be more self-sufficient and to grow their own food. So we have a 1-acre teaching and production farm called Kewakpala Gardens that we are looking to do more models that we can teach people in our community of how to grow their own food at home. And so we really focus on regenerative agriculture, or what we call indigenous agriculture. So working not with chemicals, trying to build the soil health back up. We do have a 42-foot geodesic greenhouse and a few high tunnels. And so we are teaching people how to grow their own food, as well as supplying food for our community in terms of local food access. We can go to the next slide, please. We operate a farmers market. We're like the only farmers market in our region, in the South Central part of the state. And we are able just to provide everything that an entrepreneur would need. We provide POS system, so we're able to accept debit, credit, and SNAP. We provide all the canopies, chairs, and tables, anything that would prevent someone from coming to the market to be able to sell their goods. And it's just a really a unique place for community building. There isn't a lot of spaces currently on Rosewood that we are able to do that. So it's really evolved from, back in 2015, a 2-vendor farmers market to now we have about 15 to 16 that come regularly. And last year we had a total of 35 vendors come through a farmers market. Next slide, please. For us, we are really trying to transform healthcare in our area as well. Really looking at food as medicine and seeing how we can put that into practice. And so one of the ways that we started doing that was piloting a food prescription program 2 years ago. And what we learned is that people don't really like the idea of like food as prescription. And so we kind of transformed that into this health and wellness coaching program. So we also, recruit families in order to, create this idea and this like supportive environment for We Chose Only, which is holistic health. And it's really a 6-month program where we work with families to develop health and wellness goals, go through like cooking classes and health and fitness classes, and also providing them with incentives to be able to purchase food at the farmers market. And then when we're not in the growing season, they can purchase food at one of the grocery stores located on Rosebud. Next slide, please. And for us, one of the biggest things that we've viewed in our culture is really empowering the next generation. And so for us, that is youth engagement is one of the biggest areas that we focus on. We've launched our 7-Gen internship program, and that's for high school and college students. And that's like a 10-week, and kind of this year we're doing a 7-week, but that's really just geared towards developing the next generation of leaders. And so they go through each week and focus on a different topic, whether that be food sovereignty, financial literacy, local language, history and culture, health, education, and social emotional intelligence. Next slide, please. In terms of workforce development, if we want to change our food system, we got to have people who are able to grow the food. So we launched an 8-month apprenticeship program where we recruit tribal members who are interested in starting their own farm, or at least increase their home sovereignty. And so they learn all the hands-on skills that they need to do in order to produce that food. So they work on our farm throughout the 8-month program. They go through different trainings and workshops to be able to get ready to launch a business. And we also like farm tours to kind of give them ideas on what's available and what's possible. And then on completion of the program, they're required to submit like a business plan, or what we're calling a sustainability plan, really laying out their plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And then we offer them a startup funding. So we give them $5,000 to launch their their enterprises for their at-home farm. Next slide, please. And also just with our food system, we also want to make sure that our youth are growing up eating, the foods that we didn't have access to, including buffalo. So we've also launched a Lakota immersion school called Wakanja Ki Tokiakchi. So we launched that during the pandemic, which was a tough time to launch a Lakota immersion school. But we started out with kindergarten, and each year we added a new grade level. So we're currently at grades K through 2nd, hoping to get up to 5th grade and then eventually on to high school. But we work with the school to be able to do community buffalo harvest, so that they have buffalo incorporated in their school lunch program. And they also see the value of local foods as well, in order to supporting local vendors and producers as well. Next slide, please. And lastly, one of our biggest things is revitalizing our relationship with buffalo. As buffalo people, we've always looked at buffaloes as teachers, as nurturers, and of course as relatives. And we often credit them as being the first, ecologists, if you want to call them that, regenerating the land wherever they are. So, and so that project, we were able to lease a 28,000 acre land. And it was originally a cattle ranch, and it was very run down. The soil was very depleted. And so we wanted to bring buffalo back on to restore that land. And so we started out with, 500 heads of buffalo, and our carrying capacity is about 1,200. And I think today our numbers are a little bit over 1,000 buffaloes. So making us the largest native managed herd in the world. And so I think this project also has, not only social impacts, but, economic, ecological, and cultural. We're able to do some community buffalo harvest and doing some ceremonies around buffalo. We're already seeing some of the benefits of having buffalo back on their land again. A decrease in invasive grass species and bringing back more biodiversity as well. And this project was really, I think, important for us, that we've wanted to do this with partners who really understand us and allow us to do, the work on the ground, while also supporting us by providing like technical assistance. One of our biggest partners for this project was the World Wildlife Fund. And I think to date, they're like one of our, biggest thought partners as well, in terms of where we go along with buffalo and how it incorporates throughout our ecosystem. And one of the things we like to say is, when the buffalo are strong, Lakota will be strong. And so we are working with them to bring more buffalo back on the land. And I think for us, we are just pretty excited. We just got done with our calving season now, and so we were able to see some of the new buffalo on the ground. And it's been really great to have buffalo back on our lands again, just to be able to do some of the ceremonies that we didn't grow up having. Just for myself, I never grew up eating buffalo. I don't think it was until I was like in high school or college when I first tried it. So to be able to have, a culturally relevant protein source back in our diets again is something that we've been really excited to have again.
Thank
next
you so
slide.
much.
Yeah, thank you. And over to you, Zoe.
Can folks hear me? Oh, no.
Yes.
Yes.
Can folks
hear me?
Oh, sorry. I muted one. Sorry. Does that work?
That
Can
sounds
people hear
good
me?
from your phone.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks, y'all. And so sorry for the technical difficulties. There really are probably some gremlins at this airport Wi-Fi. Well, I'm super excited to talk about Root Springs Farm and Retreat Cooperative, fostering healing, learning, and connection for individuals, community, our Mother Earth, and centering BIPOC and LGBT community artists, activists, and healers. We are on, Root Springs is on 36 acres of unceded Dakota land. There are 6 of us who are, we call ourselves foundational co-op partners. And so we're 3 BIPOC and queer couples. And then we also have, that's for the Land Equity Cooperative. And then we have 7 people on our board of our nonprofit. And we have a hybrid that works together. And we're guided by relationship building between people and the land for healing. We've been stewarding the land for about 2 years and hosting guests. And I think we've hosted actually about 900 people and groups so far, which has been really beautiful. And next slide, please. We developed some really innovative models for resource generation, and that helped us raise a little over $2 million. Amazing. I don't know that any of us thought we would be able to accomplish that, but we, and it was really thanks to so many incredible fundraising partners and an advisory team. And we love to share about it with others. So our fundraising strategy and campaign was based on a reparations model and the idea that we deserve healing. We worked with the resource generation and our reparations accomplice model, and working through giving circles where we did reparations training for young people who are part of resource generation. They have access to wealth and want to do reparations and good work with it. So it was a wonderful partnership. And we also had the help of plenty of amazing and flexible funder partners and a legal team at Dorsey Whitney. And they really helped us get creative and be curious about the things that we wanted and asked for. They helped us with our bylaws, our cooperative bylaws. They helped us with some of the tax questions that we had if we were going to raise this large amount of money. You know, we all work for nonprofits or activists, and we're nervous about that. And then just doing education with us about the financial aspects of purchasing a farm. We have a few ways that we try to live through integrity in our stewardship. We have wonderful community partners. And so some of the things that we've done, we did a BIPOC farmers healing circle. I invited about 18 farmers of color who are part of the network of farmers of color that I work with here in Minnesota. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of what we talked about and what was so special about that in a couple minutes. We have a Solidarity Stay program, which helps support people and families who, you know, it's a stretch for them to be able to pay the amount to stay in one of our cabins or rent out the entire farm. And then we really feel like we're playing a role in helping to sustain, you know, organizers, especially organizers of color and LGBT organizers and artists working towards Black liberation. Through their organizing, they need rest and repair. And so we love encouraging that and talking to folks about how important that is to sustain the movement. And then secondly, we share the land with a group of Dakota women who have sweat lodges there in the fall and the winter. And it's really a beautiful relationship. They've taught us many things and are teaching us about some of the plant-based medicine that we have on the land. And we are so happy and honored to share the space with them. Next slide, please. I believe my visuals are coming back to me. Can anybody tell me if my slide is up?
It's up.
It is. I think
Okay.
you're a slight delay, Zoe.
Okay. Slightly delayed. Okay, well, I'm going to keep going. So the next organization I'm really excited to talk about is the Midwest Farmers of Color Collective. We are a network of over 100 farmers and gardeners of color, urban, suburban, and rural in Minnesota and the Midwest, and working together for racial equity in our food system and our farming systems to really have our communities be honored in the ways that we haven't been, and in us reclaiming our food and being recognized for the contributions that we've made for stewardship for agriculture. We host different events. We have monthly farmer social hangs, which is a great way for our farmers to meet each other. We do farmer-led projects. We have a farmer of color mapping project. We do political education and gather priorities from farmers of color in our region. And we work with other like ally organizations to you know, fight together for things that are important. Last year, we partnered on a Minnesota State legislative policy training cohort for farmer justice and environmental justice with Pan and Nevada Little Wolf, who's an amazing and experienced lobbyist. And that really helped connect our farmers of color and environmental justice leaders of color and helped them see each other as partners in organizing, and also led to some really cool projects that I might have more time to talk about in the follow-up. Next slide, please.
It's there. You have about 1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to try to go fast. This quote is from Angela, and it's really about healing, and we feel like that is such an important thing to frame, that when farmers of color get land, we heal the land. We are healing people with the food that we grow, and we're healing this food system with the organizing that we're all doing together. One of the projects that I'm really excited to talk about is the Farmer Heal Tour, which started out with just farmers meeting at our farms. We decided to take turns inviting each other to our farms and talking about the healing work that we're doing. So I did one about respite and reconnection to nature for BIPOC folks and LGBT folks. Angela Dawson did one about hemp and CBD that she's growing and teaching other BIPOC farmers to grow. She is an amazing advocate for making sure that farmers of color have access to plant-based medicine, and the policy is there with the racial equity measures so that our farmers of color can have access to those markets. It is being legalized as we speak, and so that's just really important. That tour is going to continue to different farms. And then another thing that I'm really excited to share is seed sovereignty work. So through some recent grants, we have been able to start a seed library in partnership with Plant Grow Share and Ujima Cooperative Farming Alliance and their seed collective. And so we're hosting a seed symposium on Juneteenth with Afro Eco, Jim Embry, he's just an incredible leader, Benita Adib, and several other incredible seed stewards and teachers of seed sovereignty and organizers of farmers around the country to to have these seed hubs so that we can take control of kind of the means of production and make sure that our culturally relevant crops are available to us for forevermore. I know that I think I might be running out of time.
Yeah,
Kat?
unfortunately.
Okay.
Yes.
That's okay.
Thank
I can just hand it over to Conda and maybe talk about it in the next session. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much. That was a lot and beautiful. So I'm Conda back again with the organization that I co-founded and that I have the pleasure of working with incredible people with. It's called Jubilee Justice. We are located in Louisiana, the land of the Choctaw people, where I'm seated at this very moment. I want to point out that Jubilee Justice, we have two programs. The one I'm talking about is the Black Farmers Rice Program, but there's another one as well that we call the Journeys Program that has morphed into something called Our Ancestral Journey. It's a 2-year course. We talk and work at the intersection of land, race, money, and spirit. And I want to bring that forward because land, race, and money are the places that we have felt the most harm in this country. Land, race, and money. And we bring in spirit because that is that which links us all. That's who we really are. And without coming from that lens, then we can get caught up in our heads and in all kinds of emotions that do not resolve. Land, race, money, and spirit is who we are. So next slide. Jubilee Justice. So our mission is to seed rural justice and to end rural racism. And we're doing that through new systems that serve Black agricultural communities. I always think about the spotlight of what's happening in urban America with Black folk and, those selfies or the iPhones and the videos that we see. We saw, what happened in Minneapolis and all over the country, all the devastating things that have happened to Black folks currently. But there was nobody having an iPhone or a phone at all and taking videos of what's happening in rural America. Rural America, the racism, the oppression it's unbelievable what's happening still here. And so, and particularly I'm in the Southeast, and in the Southeast where all the harm started. And so I say that what the work that we are doing is shining a light on the rural racism and injustice. Next slide. Going back to how I began talking about rice, what we are doing is we're providing, in order for us, again, to that gap of 30,000 acres that is being confiscated. How do we close that gap? Through working with Black farmers specifically on culturally significant crops. We are working with rice. We are also using moringa. We're working with sesame and cowpeas and other things as rotation crops, but rice, specialty rice being at the center of it. Also with regenerative and Afro-Indigenous land practices. Everybody's been talking about that. We have to heal the soil. Zoe pointed to earlier on the industrial ag, the harm that is happening to the soil. If we do not change the way we grow food, we will not survive. And I think that when we have land, we heal it, as what Ms. Dawson said. So we are implementing 100% regenerative Afro-Indigenous land practices and a cooperative economics and community. We're bringing the farmers together who have been isolated and separated and bringing them together as a community. And through cooperative economics, we have actually come together and we have built a rice mill that will be run and owned by the farmers themselves, by a co-op. Next slide. So what we're doing is something very different. When I think about rice, you think about water, you think about flooded fields. Flooded fields, in those flooded fields are billions and gazillions of microbes that are off-gassing methane. Rice is one of the largest contributors in agriculture to methane in the atmosphere. We think about cows, it is also rice. So this way of growing rice is without all that water. So, and it yields 50 to 100% higher yielding than conventional rice without all the water. That the soil is healthier without all the water. The roots are healthier not being submerged in all that water. Seeds, the amount of seeds that we use drops 80 to 90%. Typically, it's 85 pounds of seed per acre. We use 6 to 8 pounds per acre. The water input is less, and again, the methane. And what is happening is that it also doubles for the farmer. It's good for the environment, and it's good for the farmer. And we are sequestering carbon in our soil. So it is a beautiful intersection, the work that we're doing between economic justice and climate. Next. We here in Louisiana, we are trialing. We do all the trials. We have a cohort of farmers throughout the Southeast in Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and one also in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. On this land, we are the lab. We have tried so many different varieties because this way of growing rice is very different. There's no project like this in America. There are hundreds of thousands of farmers in Africa and Asia who are growing the system of rice intensification, SRI. There are hundreds of thousands of farmers. In the US, there are a handful. We have not come to understand why this is important. We are the only organization in this country doing this kind of trial. These are the types of rice. This is literally the farm that I'm working on. This was in 20 and 21, some of the many varieties that we're trying to see what works best here in this country and in the Southeast. Next. This is what it looks like, dry land rice. None of the water that you're used to. Yes, it requires water, but not flooded fields. This is literally our rice a couple of two harvests ago. This is what it looks like. Each one of these rows is a different variety. Next. That's us with this man here. He is one of the few people in this country, another Black man, who is doing the system of rice intensification. He's in Maryland, and we're on his farm, and he is doing an incredible job. We are working together on this project now as collaborators of sharing information, sharing equipment, and really being able to mechanize this so that this way of growing rice can actually scale. So that's us on his farm, myself and our farm manager, Ariel Edwards. Next slide, please. This is just a slide of some of our farmers that we work with throughout the Southeast. Again, they are only one of these farmers actually is a rice farmer. And it was in my first conversation with them, the Sanders, which is the bottom left, the two men, the father and son, the Sanders, who are rice farmers. And they have over 200 acres of rice, of conventional rice. And when they saw and tried the rice that we're doing and saw how much yield they get with a little bit of input, they were, of course, astounded. And it was in my first conversation with him that I realized that where the money goes in rice is to the second person, that third party, who, after the farmer does takes all the risk, whether they have a good year or not, then it goes to the second person. The third person, who comes and takes the rice, mills it, and makes the lion's share of the profit. We were like, we need to build our own rice mill then. I had no idea what I meant when I said that, but I said it and we did it. And literally, we have built a rice mill that now we have cut out the middle person. We have created an institution that the farmers will absolutely participate. First of all, they're already participating in more rice per acre. They're participating in specialty rice. Our rice, we're doing specialty rice, black rices, red rices, arboreal, different kinds of rices. So they're organic, regenerative. So all of those have a premium and having access to owning the mill. So it's a game changer. We are trying to lift up these farmers so that they now have a crop that will exceed their financials in what they have been growing in the past. Next slide.
Thank you.
Okay. This is the rice mill. we have our grand opening this Friday, May 12th. And the last slide is Jubilee Justice Specialty Foods. That's the building. That is where the rice mill exists. Thank you so much.
That was so amazing. I hope you all are still with me. This is my favorite part. We believe that it's imperative for us today to pass on our ike and our knowledge, what little we have, as being like this middle generation, right? There's the elders, our kupuna, and then there's kind of this generation that I'm in, the wonky do-gooders, and then there's the youth who may or may not see value in reconnecting with the land that we path this out for them. So we're working with elders, the kupuna, and taking this kuleana on ourselves so that we can care for the places, the lands, the language, the food, and the medicine, and carry that forward. You can, oh, that's my son on the left. So he is our Aino warrior, our boy who has always had an affinity for farming. He is trimming the kalo plant so that we can replant the middle section, and this can go on and on and on for years and years. So we're so happy that at least one of our children loves this work. And then these girls that are in the right side of this photo are students of ours. They're in the 7th grade at a Hawaiian charter school, and they are cleaning the corm or the kalo after we steam it. And we've been running this program all year from last August. And everything that's harvested from the land, I cook. I volunteer to make food for them so that they can also not only plant and learn how to do that, but they can also cook and eat the foods that they're helping to sustain us. Next slide, please. Oh, that is so tiny. I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. Anyway, my work at PAN, Pesticide Action Network, in the Hawaii region this year is really focused on working with elders and working with Aina advocates that are pulling these two projects together in a really small way that I see. Because of funding, we could really only do 5 this year, but 5 is better than nothing. And basically we're asking our elders what they see, what knowledge and ike do they want to offer up to us and the future generations around land challenges, food sustainability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the Mauna Kea exhibit is lifting up the movement around Mauna Kea and the standing of our elders in protection of the not building the TMT or the 30-meter telescope on Hawaii Island. So these two projects are being weaved together in my work at PAN. I want to lift up these other important people that are doing work in my community. There's so many folks. I could give you the list and just lift up every single person that has been volunteering, doing their life's work, their life's passion around food, around land, about getting families back on land to be able to grow food. And these are some of the ways. So the Anahola La'au Lapa'au Collective are people who are growing medicinal plants to be able to share with people that are in movements. So that's also led to having to grow the medicine instead of going all over to collect them. And so this group here is looking for Aina access and for access to water and equipment to continue this work. The Waipa'a Foundation is very well known. We call it, excuse me for any Hawaii people on here, we call it the Hawaii Disneyland. It's actually like the epitome of what everyone wishes could develop. And this was not an overnight success. I know the ED volunteered herself for 6 to 8 years and brought her own family into this organization to bring cow farmers into the space to be able to make poi, to be able to feed our elders and community. So now they have a certified kitchen, a poi mill, and multiple programs, including internships. And I just, when I hear Matt talking about his programs, I just like just raising that work up. Kipuka Kuleana is also on the island of Kauai. This is a fairly new organization that also has had multiple organizers for years and years and years. And it started off as a University of Hawaii cohort and class around taking land issues and Kuleana lands in particular. So the ones that get passed down through the families that either got stolen or they couldn't keep up with the land taxes, or they just weren't able to be on the land. So somehow a foreign entity would come in and scoop that up and say, oh, there's no Hawaiians over here, you know, visiting. So in my last minute, I want to lift up Iwi Kua, who is very close to our heart as well. A young Native Hawaiian man who came back from the continent after he got his physical therapy degree and physical science degree, and is doing awesome work on his farm doing hydroponic farming, but also works with kids doing rock climbing. And I don't know if you folks know him. He's awesome. Josh Maury. He's everywhere at once. I have a hard time pinning that guy down, but I think that it's much, that's kind of like how we all are. Thank you so much, everybody, just from the bottom of our heart. And this is this your slide, Kat?
It is. And I think we
Awesome.
could we could move that one down for a moment because we do have a few minutes to have a conversation. I think we can just have the speakers up if that's okay. And we did want to take a few moments. First of all, just thank you. Let's just put some appreciations in our in the chat, in the emojis, however you do your appreciations. The amount of information, of context, of intense, important, critically important and violent, traumatic context, and the incredible pathways of healing that you're bringing forward all in this hour and a half. I'm just absolutely blown away. So thank you for this incredible presentation and opportunity. I do want to ask this question of you if you're willing. I want us to address those of us who are funders in this space. What is it that you, and this is the beginning of a conversation we're going to continue on May 9th, but I'd love to hear from each of you, even a small number of words. But how do you feel like funders can support this work in really authentic ways? We would love to hear that. And there is one other question here in the chat, but let's just focus on that question. We'll bring any other questions, funders. I invite you to put them in the chat. Erin is taking them and we are going to bring them into May 9th. So please put your questions in there and we're writing them all down. But for this space right now, as we close, I would love to hear from our speakers. Thanks. Kanda?
I have a little bit to say. I think that, you know, even the bifurcation of funders and fundees and grantors and grantees, I wish we could get rid of, to tell you the truth. I think that it separates us. And in that separation, there's an inherent power base and a power imbalance. And that's the problem. That's the problem. I believe that there are people who are stewarding money, more money than other people, and there are people who are stewarding more ideas of how to heal what has been harmed throughout whatever the work is, whether it's in ag or other places, and that there's a partnership between those two people or organizations. That partnership together with a level of power sharing is what is necessary. I think we have to really lose the mentality that philanthropy has been, as far as I'm the one with the money and jump through the hoops and fill out these forms and spend a lot of time answer, with reports. And it's not working, and it doesn't work well. And it continues this false bifurcation between who's who. My ideas, the ideas that Matt has, the ideas that Zoe and Lorilani, the organizations that they are stewarding, oh my God. And that's less than someone who has the funds? Couldn't be. There's no way it is. It's the way we've been taught that it is. We need to change the narrative. We need to be truthful about this power relationship and de-escalate it and start all over again and come together as partners. That's what I think is necessary. And that's how I approach my organization and the people and the beautiful people who happen to be funding the beautiful partners that I have. I consider them partners and not funders.
Thank you, Khanda. Thank you. I see a lot of nodding and appreciation for that. Any other
Yes,
Zoe? Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm sorry again about the technical difficulties, but I was going to say I agree with you, Khanda, 100%. One of the things, when we were trying to figure out how to finance Root Springs, and we had all these questions. We had never done anything that big before, I don't think any of us, and we were a little scared, honestly, about the tax liability and just like kind of not knowing certain things that were then explained to us about how people could donate. And I think one of the things we really appreciated is funders willing to be flexible. Like they were going to go on a journey with us and we were going to explore things and see what worked, as opposed to, you have to do this thing. You said you were going to do this thing. You know exactly what it is. You know exactly what the target is and where you're going to land. And if you don't, you don't. That is also a relationship that is just not helpful, but we've had those with other funders. And so we just really appreciate people, funders willing to be curious with us and willing to look at things. We looked at something called preferred perpetual stock. And that was a way to have an amazing, very flexible funder be willing to take grant funds that we had received and invest in our cooperative, and then elect to forgive the debt after a certain amount of years. And that was such a phenomenal offering, because we needed to pay down the cost of the land, and the land is owned by the equity co-op. So as opposed to the nonprofit. So just, I would say the flexibility and the real partnership.
Thank you. Matt, can I give you the last word on this question before we move to closing? Unfortunately, Lorilani had to jump off and we just send her well wishes. She was here despite being pretty ill. So yeah. Yeah,
I just wanted to echo what Zoe was saying about having that flexible, human-centered funding. I think some people call it patient capital or restorative investing, but I think for us as Chanco, that really has meant general operating support, or what Zoe had talked about, like loan forgiveness, or interest-only payments. I don't think we could have done our Woolako to Buffalo project without that help. And I think for us, when you think of partners too, a lot of it has come up with early partnership and shared risk. I think that having that willingness, like Zoe had said, coming along that journey with us, and the willingness to offer both technical and financial support, whether or not we have an investment ready project or not, I think that was really important for us in the early stages of our work. So thank you.
Thanks so much. This has been very powerful and the beginning of a collective conversation about how we can be in partnership together in some of the ways that you were describing. So as we wind up here, I see some other folks volunteering to coordinate. Thank you so much, Judy Hatcher, a conversation within the Biodiversity Funder Group members. Wonderful to have you here. And there's one slide right before this, I believe. Yeah. So we wanted to close with this, Sarah and I, continued call to deepening and action and building these sorts of partnerships. I put this quote from one of our partners and an elder who has taught us so much, who is Uncle Walter Riddy from Hawaii. This is the island of Molokai. And his quote is, "When we all love the land, we are all family." I think the healing and reparative invitation that has been embodied in this webinar is a way that we move into belonging together, and the land helps us get there. So I just am so grateful for that invitation. We wanted to lift up that direct relationships are welcome and encouraged with these groups. You will be receiving their emails, their information. Sarah, maybe I'll hand it over to you to go over some of the other next steps that we're calling for and inviting folks into.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kat. Yes, also, really inviting everyone that's been on this call to be able to join us on Tuesday, May 9th, where we can go deeper into the conversation that was just begun together and really look at how to move more funding and also shift the power dynamics, everything that was just laid out by our speakers. I'm so grateful for. So please join us for that conversation. Also an invitation to continue the learning that I'm so grateful for that all of our speakers shared within this hour and a half together. And then Judy, thank you for volunteering, mobilize financial investment, bring in other funders. How do we move more money, and just deep appreciation for trying to rethink how we're all partners in stewardship, no matter what we're stewarding. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our speakers.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much. We will see you on May 9th. And we look forward to also the creative conversation, Greg, around moving capital and financing farmers that we can have together. These folks are all doing that as well. So grateful for that question. We can pick that up. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.